We'll go ahead and get started here with today, but thank you all for coming. Anything that you see here today will also be post edited. You can find it online at Spotify, YouTube, all of those different platforms as well. So if there's something that someone's talking about and is interesting, go back and rewatch the panel as we have this conversation over the next like 30 to 40 minutes. But today, thank you for our sponsors of Madera Pump and West Side Equipment for helping us put this stuff on and making sure that we're having these conversations as we continue to really navigate water, as it seems like it's changing pretty quickly all around us. Steve and I have had a lot of conversations, Matt and I haven't had as many conversations with Mr. Wright here, but he's a wealth of knowledge. And so just for the crowd and some people that might not know who each of you guys are, just could you give yourself a quick intro? Steve, you want to start on the end?
Yeah, real quick. Steve Jackson. I've been in ag my whole life, actually third generation here in California. Farmed most of my life on the west side of the valley out by in western Kings County. Had opportunity to serve on a lot of different, got interest in water policy, water politics about 30 years ago, 25, 30 years ago. And through the course of my career, I got to serve on a lot of different water boards. And so as we entered into this groundwater legislation that was passed back in 2014, I knew things were going to change. So over the last few years, I've kind of migrated towards more water consulting. I would say probably now it's, I have a company called Next Gen Water, but we're doing strategic water consulting for individual farms, a lot of smaller or not large family operations that need help. And as Sam just mentioned, this is a ever-changing environment, and look forward to helping out however I can and contributing today as well.
Well, first, thank you very much for having me. I appreciate that wealth of knowledge, but I don't want you to start your pants catch on fire. What I have a wealth of is people that I call. And actually, Steve and Matt are two of the people that I often call for. I haven't had a chance to talk to Matt lately, but yeah, throughout all of this, I publish waterrights.net, and it is a ag irrigation reporting service. I have some of my colleagues are here. Joel Hastings, one of our reporters, and we try to do two or three things. First, our goal is to help farmers get water. Secondly, there's that nexus between where water is a public commodity, you might say, publicly owned, it becomes privatized at the irrigation in the water district. That's the focal point there where it changes. And we try to keep abreast of that, some of the legislation going on, the regulatory scene. And again, it's a lot of knowing the right people to ask the right questions of. And again, thank you for letting me be here.
Yeah, Matt Angell. I'm a small family farmer, and we grow almonds, wine grapes, and then we raise Black Angus cattle. So how's that put me in water? Well, water is the most important thing of everything. And so I've been lucky, the last 35 years of my life, started two or three companies, turned two or three companies around, but and probably the last 10 to 15 years, I've sold two companies to either a VC or an equity group. We just got completed with an equity sale. Been really good. My expertise is in Central Valley groundwater, and then crop cycle functions. And so those are some of the things that we'll talk about today.
Thank you for those quick intros. As now, two of you, Matt, this is his first year on the panel, but Steve and Don, they were both with us last year. Last year felt like it was the first year of Sigma really taking effect for a lot of growers, and a lot of people were here listening. What has happened in the last 12 months since now, and some changes that growers can expect for this growing season?
Okay, well, I'll start real quick. A lot's happening, I'll put it that way. I'll just add in too, I do farm here in Tulare County in the Kauai subbasin, and we are seeing these plans that were held to be inadequate now that have been turned over to the State Water Board. We have these probationary hearings coming up in 2024. This year, 3 of the basins have to revise their plans, and so there's a lot of activity here just in this area within the Tulare Lake, Kauai, and Tule. And so I would say pay attention. Some of this stuff, personally, I feel some of the managers and board members may be overreacting a little bit. That's my personal opinion, because we need to keep an eye on the fact that we got to keep our land productive with water. So I think it's important farmers stay engaged and clear on what these transitional pumping rules. The state board's made two things very clear to us, is they want domestic wells or de minimis pumpers taken care of. They want a very clear, well-funded plan to take care of wells that may go dry for domestic users. And the other thing is they want to deal with subsidence in this area. So I think we have to pay attention. These plans are being, every month these plans are being adjusted and kind of recalculated. So we're kind of at a crossroads, I would say, 24 and the next, and then 25 with the 3 other basins, but there's a lot of activity going on.
My take has been, when you do something as complicated as SGMA, Sustainable Groundwater Management Act of 2014, you do it without the input from the actual growers and the people that have to live underneath this regulatory scheme they've come up with. There's going to be a lot of unintended consequences. And I think what we're seeing this year more than any other are some of those unintended consequences. For instance, the state board with their staff in November held a meeting in Hanford at the community center for public input on the groundwater sustainability plan for the Tulare subbasin. Guys, help me if I get all these acronyms screwed up. I'm trying not to talk like everybody was there. I'm going to tell you what happened. What happened was we found out that this plan was not accepted for that subbasin, the Tulare Lake subbasin, and that on April 16th of this year, the state board's going to hold a hearing. They're going to determine if the subbasin goes into probation. Now, what happens on April 16th? Boom, probation, $30 million fine, 25% penalty per month. They're going to extract $30 million out of the local economy, the local ag economy of just that subbasin. Now, is that really what's good for the people? Part of it, what they're doing, and excuse me, call me a racist, I don't care. The state board, you can go to their website and see that they consider the most dire consequence facing water in California is racial equity. Yet 80% of the subbasin, 80% of the San Joaquin Valley is Hispanic. How does it help anybody to take $30 million out of the local economy and say, okay, go ahead, pay the rest of your GSA, your Groundwater Sustainability Agency fees, pay your taxes, pay all of your air quality, your chemical. I don't think that's what SGMA was supposed to do.
Why are these plans getting rejected? Have they given, what are you seeing on that?
No, they're very clear that and they're out there on the website. You guys can go to DWR, the SGMA portal, and look at these. I don't know if it's maybe if you can't sleep at night, read some of these letters. But groundwater levels declining due to, that's why SGMA was enacted back in 2014. We came through this drought period. Groundwater levels throughout the valley have been declining. So that's one issue. They didn't feel like we had, and this is what chaps, I think all of us, we've spent thousands of hours, millions of dollars in each one of these basins developing these plans, and they've been turned down twice. So they're still saying, hey, you didn't adequately address these deficiencies to our liking. And so some of the frustration, I think, for management and consultants all is that there's a lot of feeling that some of the goalposts keep being moved a little bit further. And it's groundwater levels, subsidence, water quality. It's kind of consistently, some of these things are being throughout these basins. And it has been a very frustrating, I would say it's been frustrating for those involved, because we've invested a lot in this and we still haven't gotten these things approved. So that's my concern this year. I think Don is right, is that I don't want the basins to overreach and become too restrictive because we have a huge ag economy that's dependent upon extracting groundwater on these below average or most years, a lot of areas we have to get groundwater to continue to farm, which we're dependent upon our infrastructure. We've all spent millions of dollars drilling wells to pump this water. So I think that is a frustration we all feel right now, that we're in this no man zone of we don't know exactly what it's going to take to get these plans approved. The agencies, the management, the consultants are doing their best to come back and develop a plan. You know, we're just praying that this is they get back. But to Don's point, the Tulare hearing, when we talked about the amount of water, the fees are going to be involved. It was a huge outcry, and so we're hoping that they've heard. I can't say that will do it, but we are beginning to hear that they might actually take action to reduce some fees. So that was directly tied to the outcry from an area that, hey, we can't afford this. To Don's point, we can't afford to spend $30 million to the state of California that does not do anything to help us become sustainable. We need to find ways to put that money back into the basin that these fees are taken from to help these communities and the farms become sustainable, not take it out and never come back. So anyway, it's probably a long-winded deal.
Sam, can I kick off on it?
Yep.
I've been probably outspoken as much as anybody on Sigma. And part of it is that, you know, I get to see Sigma straight away in the Madera Basin and the Chowchilla Basin. So we owned a pump company, and so we were videoing 3 or 4 times a day. We knew where groundwater levels were. We saw extraction. We knew in the basin, if it's funny because we've got these GSAs and they're not logically or geologically located. They just happen to be an outlier of different groups, right? And all the way to the smallest. So Madera County, if you really looked at it, we've got 7, which turns out to be a freak show, you know, as far as that. Because what happens is that you've got all this diversity, you've got different opinions on how that extraction occurs, and ironically, we all have to agree, right, in our Madera Basin. So you got 7 groups not able to get along anyway, trying to make a decision on what's going to happen. And all the while, we're basically extracting water, and the decline of our groundwaters, up to about 15 was extreme. So I think we're getting our hands on it, but the real point is there's a lack of data and a lack of understanding and a lack of communication. So as a communication piece, if you just looked at the demographics of Madera County, there's 360,000 acres. In those 368,000 acres, if you divide it into thirds, 120, 120, and 120, in the first 120,000 acres, there's 650 family farmers from 5 to 500 acres. The next 120,000 acres is for 65 family farmers that are from 500 acres to 4,500 acres. And the last 120,000 acres are 13 management companies that actually don't have to make profit to stay in business, right? Now all of a sudden we've got something that's stacked against us as family farmers or people that are engaged. So now all of a sudden we're fighting a battle of influence, right? Because those 120,000 acres that are managed by those 13 management companies, they're the people that can show up at these meetings and continue to just talk in circles, right? And then we've got people that are hydrogeologists in our county that are doing modeling, right? Well, if we had real data, we would know exactly what was going on. So the reason I was outspoken is because of what Don just talked about. Our farm's been in our family for 100 years. What I didn't want to happen was adjudication, right? Which means that the state comes in and tells you exactly what goes on. There isn't anybody anywhere, whether it's a farmer or a business or a person, that needs more regulation or oversight from the government, right? What we do need, though, is input, and I think that's important. I think that there has to be somebody that collectively brings this data together, but let's talk about real data, what's actually going. So if I was to break our basin into logical spots, I'd have 10 hydro regions that matched, and then we could put transducers or measurement devices down in a well, see how much we're extracting and when it's extracting. there's all those, that data needs to come to pass, but as important with that data, there has to be communication with our people. And unfortunately, Sigma has what they call the 6 deadly sins, and I won't go through them, but they missed one, which was the 7th deadly sin, and that's called denial. We have all been in denial about what's going on in these hydro regions or these basins. And until we get to a place where we're not allowing people to talk for us, or we actually understand what the data is, then we're going to be at risk of losing the most important thing that we have. And one thing I'll say that's the most important, not just for this region, but for this country's sovereignty, is that America agriculture is the backbone, right? And I'm not advocating that, we get something just for free. I'm advocating that we need to start stepping up our game, being proactive, and letting people know what our position is.
Have we not seen anything from the federal government step in on this? I mean, agriculture, Homeland Security does govern agriculture at some point. It becomes a piece of our national security. If we don't have water and we're being able to grow in this 100-mile radius behind Fresno, and we don't have access to that, that dwindles. I mean, if you want to look at it on an environmental standpoint, almonds are the #1 when it comes to nutrition and also when it comes to sequestering carbon. But we won't have the ability to grow those without water. We also have, 60% of all of our organic produce grown here. Has the federal government not stepped in on this yet?
I don't know, Sam. I mean, they probably have. Has there been impact? I honestly don't know that either. I mean, I guess I've stepped back from the whole conversation because like I just said, it's just been this redundancy of conversation that seems like there's no solution. But more importantly, and I've already said it, is data that would tell people exactly what's going on. I mean, you measure a well and you watch the drawdown in it, and I'll give you a perfect example. Everybody, one of the subjects that we were going to talk about was energy, but everybody in my 10 miles radius of my farm on off-peak hours, which is Friday through Monday, turns their wells on to reduce the amount of cost of their electricity. In my well, you can see at home that during that, let's just say 66-hour period from Friday afternoon to Monday, happens every week, my groundwater decreases declines by 40 feet. That throws off the uniformity of my irrigation system, right? Now I'm reducing yield because my uniformity of my system's not right. And so nobody's watching any data of what's going on. If we knew that, we'd understand exactly what we have to do. So from a federal government perspective, are they doing something? Haven't seen them show up yet. I haven't. But Steve?
I'll just add, the only thing I saw under Trump when he was in office is that there was an attempt to deal with the ESA. And we all had hopes. I think a lot of us in ag had hopes that there could be a rebalancing of how the ESA's Endangered Species Act is enforced here in the Delta. But sadly, it was the opposite kind of happened because California overreacted, and whatever the administration that when Trump was in office wanted to do, they took the complete opposite tack. And so it's been very frustrating. I'll just add that for us here, the Delta is key for us on both the CVP and the CVP, which would be both Wright and Westlands, and then also the State Water Project. All of our water comes through the Delta, and we to this day are stymied because of the species that are being protected under the Endangered Species Act, not balanced to really economic balance. There's no balancing of what the cities and farms are suffering from. So I would say, Sam, that's the only thing that comes to mind that the federal government has attempted, but under the current administration, there's been zero support for us here on that regard.
Go ahead.
Okay. The Fed's real area of leverage is the Delta, in my opinion, because there is supposed to be I think it's a 5-year review consistently on the Endangered Species Acts involvement with the Delta. Now, we've had some really ridiculous legislation passed. For one thing, let's restore salmon to Friant Dam, the very southernmost outfringe of the salmon territory under nature. And so far, it's cost more than $12.5 million per fish. And that's been a 20-year fight. We get up to the Delta. Right now, the state board has more power in the Delta, I believe, than the feds do. The federal Central Valley Project has to move water from the Sacramento River through the Delta to the Jones Pumping Plant in Tracy. That water, in turn, is moved into the Delta Mendota Canal. It comes down to Los Banos at the San Luis Reservoir. It's stored and then sent elsewhere. That is how you got the exchange contractors. Excuse me if I'm drifting a little bit, but the plumbing's important. The exchange contractors exchanged San Joaquin River water to go to that they would have got out in the Los Banos area for that imported water from the Delta. Where did that water in the San Joaquin River go? It goes to the Friant Kern Canal and the Madera Canal. So what happens in Sacramento, what happens actually in Shasta, impacts what happens in Bakersfield, as well as what happens in Los Angeles, because the state water project has to bring water down the Sacramento River through the Delta to the Banks pumping plant. It pumps it into the California Aqueduct. It takes it to San Luis. Then it moves it further on down the valley through Kern County, where a lot of the ag water supply on the west side, and into Los Angeles. Currently, the state board staff, the same ones that want to take $30 million out of Hanford's economy, Kings County economy, they're saying we need to increase the amount of through Delta flows to help the fish. They're ignoring the fact 90% of the out-migrating salmon, now I wish I was making this up, 90% of the out-migrating juvenile salmon does not get out of the Delta. It's eaten by non-native sports fish, striped bass, black bass that were planted there. But you can't get the California Fish and Game Commission to change the take limit and relax that take limit on bass. I've also been told, and I cannot prove this, but I'm going to throw it out there anyway. It would cost billions of dollars for the Bay Area, from the Carquenes Straits to the Golden Gate, to upgrade their waste treatment facilities if they did not have water flowing through the Delta to dilute their waste to acceptable levels. So I'm not really sure in my mind that the way the feds are going to have much say-so on this, because so much of it's coming from the state of California, and I don't believe that they're dealing in reality.
Well, that's, Don, I think that's been a conversation forever. And I think that, obviously one thing that there needs to be is good science, right? And unfortunately there isn't. And those are the things that I always lean on. And, if you just looked at the, DWR, the water board and all those things, you got guys that are hardcore hydrogeologists, fundamentals like a Ken Schmidt. And he says it's been 30 years since we've actually had any experts in those institutions. And so we've got a lot of opinions being made mostly on marketing and, different things versus, hardcore facts of how, water moves. And the one thing that we know for sure, and it's always been the California curse, is that there's a rain curtain that exists about from Madera and goes south, right? And what's amazing, though, is that the soils from Madera south are big alluvial soils that have the ability to produce abundant crops. So we're in this always, fighting position for water versus land. And if you just looked at the San Joaquin Valley, and this is going to be a striking number, the San Joaquin Valley produces 7% of the net of gross U.S. agriculture. So in this 5 million acres, we produce 7%. I mean, that's a number that's unheard of, and it's our ability to do that with water. And so I think that's the important fact is how do we keep doing that? Again, it goes back to sovereignty. So
Steve and I were talking a little bit beforehand on the voluntary agreements. Don, could you explain what those are to some people that might not know at a high level?
Maybe. I get a little confused. What happened is, well, there was a farmer, Dennis Prosperi, told me one time. He asked me, when you drive over the San Joaquin River on Highway 99, there's water in it. When you drive over the San Joaquin River on 152 on your way to Los Banos, it could be dry. When you drive over the San Joaquin River up there in Stockton on I-5, there's ocean-going ships floating around in it. How do you have a river have water go dry and not have water? Well, the reason is because there are tributary rivers. There's the Merced, Stanislaus, Tuolumne, McCollum, yeah, between the San Joaquin River and the Delta. These rivers flow east out of the Sierras, flow west out of the Sierras. They reach. Part of what they're saying is a voluntary agreement is they're going to take more water away from the contractors that depend on the output of these tributary rivers. It's like Oakdale ID, Modesto ID, Merced ID. I'm sure there's a couple more I'm not aware, coming to mind. They're going to get to contribute they're going to be voluntold to give up more water so it can go flow out to the ocean again through the Delta. But there are some things about that are supposedly ensuring the rest of us to get a solid water supply that's not going to be taken away. I don't know if that explains it exactly. I'm not an expert on this. We just ran an editorial this morning from the state water contractors. It's a lady named Jennifer Pierre and the farmers down in Kern County that say this is a good deal. They don't call it voluntary agreements anymore, by the way. It's now the Healthy Rivers and Landscapes. I don't know if they got shamed into it. But there's still a lawsuit going on. There's the main thing is we can't just keep giving our water away. What are we, half the supply we had in 1975? We're getting half of our surface supply. No wonder our aquifers going dry. You have to have surface water come in and soak into the aquifer to keep the aquifer up. And we're getting half of the surface water we used to. So we're using micro irrigation. We're 90%, this valley's above 90%, 96%, I believe, efficient in our irrigation. Getting that extra 4%, I don't know if you could physically do that. 100% is perfection. There's not a lot of perfection. And before I forget, forgive me for trailing, I want to point out something. Sigma was written in 2024. Sigma was written and passed in 2014. You know what else was written and passed in 2014? Was Proposition 1 that was going to give us $7 billion for surface storage. I don't know, where's that surface storage? 14 years ago? No, how many years ago was this? 10 years ago? Well, we're doing Sigma pretty good because it's reducing water available to farmers, but we haven't put any money into bringing it back yet that I'm aware of. If you guys know of any Prop 1 money that's been spent in another acre foot of storage we've received, let me know because I haven't heard of it.
Yeah, I'll just add and kind of what Matt said too about data. We lack data in the Delta for these species, and so we've been frustrated for over a decade, probably going back to when Judge Wanger, when his decisions came back in 2005 or 6. We don't really know, we don't understand how best to, and we've been arguing for almost 20 years, how best to restore these flows. And so what we're seeing, the state water board is coming back and basically saying, hey, we're going to increase flows. With all the solution, they always fall back on more flow. And that's why these voluntary agreements have come forward. Is they're like, hey, we're basically saying as water users, hey, wait, slow down. we don't have good science. We don't know if that's the right way to do it. So let's craft an agreement that we'll come back and we'll voluntarily give up some of our water. But we want also to have science in place that we can measure what's actually happening to what we can best do to restore these species. It's been an ongoing debate for over 20 years. And I was going to say what Matt mentioned about science in our local areas. I totally wholeheartedly agree. We don't know as farmers, we are not really monitoring our wells, and how the Sigma is being implemented here locally is by using ET, this land IQ, basically by measuring evapotranspiration off the ground. I don't think that's going to be how, and I know it's not. We're going to have to go back to wells, meters. I love the idea of even a transducer, but we need to know what we're pumping so we can have more real-time data, so we can make better decisions, because these areas, these GSAs are really flying fairly blind still. They kind of have a rough idea what we're pumping, but we don't know what levels that most of these wells are perforated down to. And so once we get, it's going to take a lot more information that, so I was a little digress on that, but back to the voluntary agreements, we don't have the information right now to really manage it correctly.
With moving away from the Sigma a little bit conversation, this year it looks like we're not getting the snowpack that we had last year. It looks like allocations might be a little bit less this year. What are you guys thinking right now on allocation? It looks like it's still pretty early to decide, but do you think there will be allocations like we had this last year?
You got to ask these guys who farm, right? Because they get it. I just report on it. But I'd say I'm optimistic that we're going to have a normal year. Last year was amazing. It was one of the wettest years, record-breaking. I mean, when was the last time the Tulare Lake reappeared? Been 30 years, 40 years maybe? So they're never, by the way, allocations, they're never going to give you a straight answer until at least middle of April or May, because they don't know. Who knows? Who knows how much it's going to rain? I like President Truman. He said, "I want a one-armed economist, so they can't tell me on the other hand." I'm looking for a one-armed meteorologist to give us. It's pretty, but these guys may have some insight. I know that the hog spleen has been extremely accurate.
So Sam, all I got to do is step out this tent, look out to the east, and I got a pretty good idea. We got snowpack, and that's really where we get our water. And the thing that I think that's been concerning is, as our climate's changed, we've got these later rainfalls. We're getting, snow in the Sierras, and what I think really happens to us is that snow melt's occurring faster because these snows are later, and then we get rain on top of snow. What we need to do is what we talked about is how do we get this water? And I think there's been a lot of effort going forward in recharge, right? I think people are trying to get water back in the ground. We're watching in Madera, those guys put in 400,000 acre feet into our district over and above what our users used. So they're getting farmers to go back in and putting, they're giving water, at low cost to do it during the winter. And guys are flooding. People are going off. But, one thing that has to happen, Don said something, which is, we do need to recharge, but our best recharge effort is turn a pump off. And if we're using district water or we got more snowpack, those are things that'll affect us. But I gotta think we're going to get. We've got 3 storms stacking up here this week. So, but you're right, Don. I miss my calling not being a meteorologist. I'm not that funny.
Yeah, you really. Have you heard about the hog spleens, though, literally?
Yeah.
There's a dairyman down here in Tulare County named Tom Barcelos, and he always comes to the Friant Water Authority meetings with the hog spleen report. And for the last 2 years, when they butcher a hog, they dissect the spleen and look at it. It's been more accurate than the meteorologist, literally.
I'll just add, I talked to a Westlands board member this morning, and they're thinking roughly around 20-25% is that we're going to see initial allocation on the CVP. I think San Luis, it might be a little higher. So that's encouraging. The State Water Project, I think it started out at 10%. But again, I agree with Matt. It's great to see snow in the mountains right now. That's our insurance for a decent year right now. We're tracking about, I think, 70 to 80% of average snowpack right now, and so with more storms coming, hopefully we can get to an average or above, maybe above average year. And with the reservoirs really full, Sam, coming into this year, totally different than last year, I think we should have hopefully decent to above average allocations across all the valley.
One of the things too, I'd urge people to contact their legislator. California's budget's just upside down as usual. But there's a thing called the ASO, the Airborne Snow Observatory. And what they do is they take planes and they'll fly them over the snowpack, and they use LADAR, whatever the heck that is, I don't know. But it bounces back and it tells them very accurately. They don't have to take mules and backpacks and snow pillows and the rest. They get a really clean, accurate, consistent version. They'll take these flights, everything. It's not cheap. But in comparison, the allocation, the flood control, the rest of it that goes with knowing how much snow is up there that information, that data has been significantly improved with these, they call it the ASO. Looks like funding's in trouble for the ASO. And
No way.
Yeah, it would help the farmers, Matt.
Is there anything else that we could be doing to help make sure? So like that's really a technology-driven approach then of measuring. Steve and I were just talking last week. He was in our office. I mean, you see Saudi Arabia they put $22 million into cloud seeding this year. Is there options like that we can be taking on a local level or at the water district level to make sure that we have a constant supply, making sure that when rainstorms are coming in, maybe we're getting the most amount of rainfall possible to make snowpack?
Well, there's cloud seeding.
What was that?
There is cloud seeding.
Yeah, Steve, you said it's actually happening, in the Tulare Basin?
Yeah, I know in Kauai they do it here, and I believe the Kings River Water Association does it as well. I think those two I'm aware of, both pay to have cloud seeding done. And so it's been around for a while, Sam. I don't know, I guess, would they have data on it? I haven't really looked at it, but they are doing that here locally.
Is there anything else that they could be doing, Matt?
Yeah, I don't have an opinion on cloud seeding. The one thing that I do know is that our forests are critical for us. In Madera County, half of our county is forest country, right? And so our understanding of our watershed and then our ability to go up there and then basically do reforestation. I mean, go in where there's burns, but go in where the density of a forest is 500 trees per acre. That needs to be closer to 110. So we've got to be able to clean up our forest. Two reasons. One is for fire damage, and the other is for more productive watersheds. And if we can do that, I think that's a really big focus for us to look at. And I'll tell you, there's been a little part of me always. I'm like, people have asked me, well, that well's should have water in it, and I go, well, if it did have water, I wouldn't need to be here, right? I mean, so there's nobody making water, but ironically, we ran into a guy this year, and he's got a company called Raindrop, right? And he's got these big condensers that sit in a room, and basically what he's doing is extracting water from the atmosphere. And he's got plans, where there's higher salinic soil or alkalinic soil. There's guys that are looking at this, so it'd be like a 5-acre building with these sheds in it, producing 1,000 gallons a minute, but it's pure water, right? Now, I would have never thought that was possible. But the one thing, again, I'll go back to, our system allows for people to be innovative, turn technology around. I'm always amazed sometimes at how things come to pass and who's doing them. And I'm excited. Capitalism is alive and work. Yeah.
I would echo that too. I think farmers are amazingly resilient, and I think there's a tremendous amount of technology coming our way. I think it's going to help us use our water more efficiently. I know there's a lot of research going on, different breeding of rootstocks that are going to be more drought tolerant. We're going to have to adapt. We have, I like what Matt said earlier about we're in denial. I think, being here farming with my, family since the, 70s too, we developed wells that now that we probably over extracted and we overdeveloped some of our areas. So now we have to be smarter with our water, our groundwater. We need it, but we have the most productive area, one of the most productive areas in the world right here in the San Joaquin Valley. So I know we're all here. We're very interested in preserving this way of life and this ag base. So I think, that this farm show, I would say there's probably some stuff I'm not even aware of, but I think that's what's exciting. Our capitalism, our system, and how we adapt is amazing to me. How we can make stuff come, out of nothing. We'll take something and make turn it around.
Go ahead, Don.
Well, I can't address the technology side as much, but I'm glad Matt brought up about the forest. I'd forgotten that. I've heard some amazing predictions of increasing the water supply. I think what we from my perspective, the most dangerous thing out there is the unintended consequences of poor legislation and regulation. Now, we've got SGMA lasts for 40 years. You have 40 years to bring your groundwater into compliance, your basin into compliance. And, 20 years.
I wish we had 40.
You have 80 years. Thank you. Year 2040.
Yeah.
Okay. This is why I use journalist math.
That's okay.
So we got 20 years. Yet already we're into it now. And the implementation started in 2020. So we're 4 years into it. They're already in Sacramento rewriting legislation to adjust how they think it should go. And then 3 years from now, 4 years from now, when there's another election, they're going to write new laws, and it's chaos. We need to lock something down. There's a goalpost, great. Let's leave that goalpost in place. Because when they started SGMA, they never said what to do. They just told you what not to do. And as you guys just said, put all this money into plans, millions and millions of dollars. I mean, when they passed SGMA, I heard jokes about engineers and attorneys parachuting into California just to get their nose into the middle of that stuff. We didn't know what's underground. What's a hydrogeologist going to do if they don't have the data? You can't plan. So they figured the first 5-year segment of SGMA was going to be data gathering. Well, they didn't pass the doggone GSPs because they said they didn't have enough data. But they knew that it's a recurring circle of. Now and let me say this too. I like a lot of the people in Sacramento. I like the state board members. I think they're trying to do the right thing given what they have. I think even staff, which is totally out of control, but it's out of control because they don't know what they're working with either. If we could get some solid, long-term vision coming out of Sacramento, I believe that'd do more than almost anything.
Yeah, I like that, Don. Here's it's important that we think about this. I want everybody to close their eyes. Close your eyes. What do you see? Nothing, all right? That's what everybody sees in a well. If a well sat above ground and you could see exactly what was going on, we could manage it a lot better, right? But since we can't see it, we just don't know what's going on, right? And that's the most important factor that we really look at, is if we can identify and able to measure those, what's going on, we can start changing things.
Before we wrap up here, does anyone in the audience have a question for anyone up here on the panel?
Do you ever see a time in the future where we might import water from other states, where you have a region that might be in excess of water and pipe it across the country?
Well, Colorado's not going to let us do it. John, I think, Washington would be our best bet, but I think water's so important everywhere to everybody that I think that you're gonna see water have a barrier, and people are gonna have to figure it out. And that may be the best thing. Once we start importing and doing different things, all kinds of different things occur. So I don't have, I don't have a stake set in the ground, but man, I'll tell you, it's going to come down to water's going to be worth more than oil.
I think so, to answer your question. I think there is that possibility. But it's going to take a truly dynamic shift in attitude in the regulatory. And the other thing, the other elephant we haven't discussed is non-governmental organizations and their hindrance to the process. But it's possible. I've been told theoretically, of course, theoretically everything's in theory possible. But I could see it happen.
I'll just go ahead. What do you guys?
Why doesn't ag have NGOs?
Actually, ag is we are NGOs. Farm Bureau's an NGO.
Why don't we have a seat at the table?
Yeah, that's a good one, huh? That's a good point.
Yeah, I don't know too. I mean, William asked. I've always been frustrated how little we have. We're pushing back on some of the NGOs, but we need to be advocating for ourselves too. And back to that point about importing water, I think we still haven't done enough in California to. We have desal is something that we need to take a serious look at on the coastal area where most people live in California, and then I think continuing to retreat our wastewater. We've made great strides, but we're still not there yet. So I think we got to be more efficient with our use. I looked at what Israel has done over the last 50 years. They're very similar to us in climate. They've become water independent in an area where they have no friends, and they have. So that's someone to look at. They've done a very good job of being water secure, producing amazing amount of produce, taking care of their population. So it can be done. It just takes some real creativity. We just haven't been willing to invest in that yet.
Okay, first off, I'd like to thank you guys all for sharing your wealth of knowledge. In looking at the panel, I see that there is a lot of experience that is sitting up there in the chairs, and I'd like to know what you guys are doing to bring up the next generation and to help share that knowledge. Is there an interest there? I mean, do you have people knocking down your doors to try to learn what you know and to carry it on? Because isn't that, if we forget where we've been, we just go right back?
Thank you. That's the most important technology we have, is education. And I think that, our transfer of knowledge is absolutely critical. I think that, what we have to do is get young people engaged in what we're doing. And that's just us setting a stake in the ground, right? When I start talking about the forest, what I love about the forest is that there isn't anybody that doesn't love the forest, right? And so I think it's a perfect launch pad. And, I sit on the state FFA Foundation board, and it is, one of my mandates is to push on natural resource curriculum. We have guys like SPI, who is Sierra Pacific Industry, that, we were just on a tour up at the Rim Fire a month ago. There's 250,000 acres that was burned. Of that, 16,000 acres been rehabbed. So just a spot, but that was done by SPI. They have some of the most amazing foresters on staff. And as it turns out, SPI is a donor to the foundation to promote kids to move. So how do we start there isn't anybody in this room that wouldn't want that to happen. There are organizations from, Shasta to Kern that have proliferated and asking, what do we do? And I think it comes back to us developing a communication, a plan that educates, and then getting kids engaged, because one thing I know, it's just not ag kids, it's not just kids in the valley, but every kid that is alive in California, I think, cares about what's happening in California. And I think they care so much that they're depressed that nobody's doing anything about it, right? And I think that's the biggest travesty, is that they've lost hope. So we've got to figure out what we're going to do. And it feeds right into what we're talking about, is food, water, and then, and we've burned 10 million acres of the 30 that we have, right? So how do we get it reforested? How do we get it recentered? And it's going to be a kid. See her with that iPhone right there? She's going to go to the forest and she's going to characterize an area that's going to get uploaded to a GIS, and people now will be. That's our biggest constriction in the forest right now. We can't get data out. We don't know where the hot spots are. We don't know what needs to be done. So I think we've got 2,500 registered foresters, and none of them have the time to do it. But if we get kids with boots on the ground out in the forest and say, hey, here's 10,000 acres and we need, all the water areas. We need, where's the north slopes? What's the biological things going on in this forest? We can change that. I don't mean to get all, this is my most exciting thing. So to answer your question, thank you. And I think it is, I'm sitting over, actually, I'm going to make an unbiased or unabashed pitch over in the Farm Credit Building. We're raffling a John Deere tractor in 1948. What it goes to is leadership projects for FFA. So they're $20 a ticket, and I'd love for everybody to come down there and get a ticket, because it's going to support what you just talked about.
I'll add too. I'm always talking to young people whenever I chance I get to just impart. Hey, you guys got to be engaged. Talk about what we can do. Try to get there. And I'm always recruiting more the younger generation to be on these water boards. I've spent a lot of time the last 5 years recruiting, trying to get people to serve, because I think that's the best thing. You got to get involved. You got to be at these local levels, and it's a great opportunity. So that a little bit of a frustration, but I think people are so busy farming. There's a lot of the younger generation too are just trying to get their hands on, feet on the ground, what they're doing. But I keep talking water policy. They got to understand water policy going forward, because it's going to be critical to for their whole career. So yes, I'm always out talking, and if you have anyone who wants to gets more, I'll be more than happy to help, mentor.
Looks like we got a question in the back there.
It's sort of a question. Has anybody ever considered using seawater pumped over the coast into the valley, and then using perforating molecular-sized filter with a pump push, and then the gravity feed in the well, dropping the water down to aid that pump push to recharge the water?
I think there are people looking at it. The cost to go through that, that filter that you're talking about has a high cost. There's some companies in the west side right now that they're selling water for, I think, like $1,300 an acre foot, that are going through those filters. So what they're doing is they're turning the pump off and not extracting it, and then using that water to grow a crop. I don't know if that water's coming from, across the hill. It's probably getting pumped out of the ground right there, but it's a great question.
Yeah, I know in Westlands they're doing some, I think, brackish. We got a Westlands director here too, but they're doing a brackish. They're reclaiming brackish water. That I'm not aware of anybody pumping salt water. We do have a lot of brackish, higher TDS water in the valley, shallow groundwater. That will be that's a perfect opportunity to do that with. I know in some countries that, like in Saudi Arabia, the Middle East, they're using seawater desalinization to provide their cities and their ag for stuff. So I don't think I hope we never have to come to that level of pumping seawater over here to desal it. I would say we have plenty of brackish water here in the valley to do that. Same technology.
I'd like to comment on that just a little bit. Westlands is trying to do that for ag purposes, but also to backstop some of our disadvantaged communities. Because some of them are 100% reliant on surface water, and when surface water gets tight, we want to have the ability to make sure our communities still continue to thrive.
So I would talk to Westlands is on the forefront of that right now.
I've learned recently. Now, what I believe you're talking about is it's called reverse osmosis. It's energy intensive.
Gravity-aided reverse osmosis.
Yes, ma'am. It costs about the same now. By the way, the biggest user of power in California is moving that water on the state water project over the Tehachapies into, that's the single biggest use of electrical power in the state. It costs about the same to desalinize water, the same amount of water that we pump to LA, they can desalinize it for the same cost. The trouble with desal is kind of like the idea of we're going to turn the entire state's automobiles electric. We don't have the infrastructure to move it. They bring that water in Los Angeles. They do it on the east side at a high point with gravity. So yeah, and anybody in this room but me would probably be able to explain it better. But you start off with the big pipe, but to keep that head pressure, the pipe gets smaller and smaller. That's why they don't desal in LA. All the ocean water's down at the bottom of the hill. They would then have to pump it right back up to the top of the hill so it would fit into the plumbing. So desal's got its own built-in plumbing problem that the Bay Area, by the way, would not have to as great a degree. And they seem to have a lot of salt water there, so ask them why they don't desal.
Well, thank you guys for your time on this panel today. I hope the audience really got to learn a lot from you. And once again, thank you for Madera Pump and Westside Equipment for sponsoring this podcast. And if you guys have any questions, these guys are around after, and appreciate you guys for coming. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot.